That's government property." The Yellowstone Ranger's voice carried across the thermal basin, sharp with authority as he strode toward the figure kneeling near the steaming pools. Raymond Freeman, 69 years old and covered in mud, looked up from where he'd been carefully excavating something from the mineralized soil. His hands held what appeared to be metal objects, corroded, aged, but clearly man-made. The ranger, young and zealous in his first season, saw only what training had taught him to see: illegal artifact hunting on protected federal land. "Sir, step away from that site immediately. You're under arrest for theft of government property and vandalism of a protected geothermal area." Freeman stood slowly, his arthritic knees protesting, holding the objects carefully as the ranger reached for his handcuffs. If you believe some recoveries are about reclaiming pieces of yourself, comment "respect" in the chat. Raymond Scout Freeman had waited 50 years for this moment. 50 years since he'd been a young soldier participating in a classified Army survival training program, learning to operate in extreme environments, to survive in conditions that would kill most people. Yellowstone in winter of 1975 had been their final test. 2 weeks in sub-zero temperatures, minimal equipment, living off the land while evading tracking teams. Freeman had been good at it, exceptional even, earning the call sign Scout for his ability to move through terrain, leaving minimal trace. But on day 13, near these same thermal pools, he'd fallen through thin crust into scalding runoff, suffering severe burns that should have killed him. His gear, including his dog tags, field compass, and emergency beacon, had been stripped off and left behind when his training team evacuated him by helicopter to base hospital. The program had been classified. The site had never been properly recovered. For 50 years, pieces of his identity had been slowly mineralizing in thermal soil. The ranger, his name tag read Collins, wasn't interested in Freeman's explanation. He'd heard every excuse from actual artifact hunters, from tourists who thought rules didn't apply to them, from people who believed wanting something badly enough justified taking it. "Sir, anything found in Yellowstone National Park belongs to the federal government. You can't just dig up historical items because you think you have a right to them." He secured the handcuffs, careful but firm, calling for backup on his radio, while Freeman stood patiently, still holding the corroded metal objects. Collins photographed them, cataloged them in evidence bags. 2 dog tags barely legible, a compass so mineralized it looked like a rock, and what appeared to be remnants of an emergency beacon. "These look military. Do you have any idea how significant these could be archaeologically? You're potentially destroying an undocumented military site." Freeman almost laughed at the irony. "They're mine. I left them here in 1975 during a training exercise. I'm not destroying a site. I'm recovering my own property." Collins shook his head, the patience of someone dealing with an obviously false claim. "Sir, that makes no sense. If you left them in 1975, there would be documentation, recovery procedures, official channels. You wouldn't be sneaking around a restricted thermal area with a shovel at 6 in the morning." Which was fair, from Collins's perspective. What he didn't know was that the program Freeman had been part of was so classified that even 50 years later, most of its documentation remained sealed. What he didn't understand was that Freeman had spent months researching declassification schedules, waiting for the moment when he could legally acknowledge the program's existence, when he could finally recover pieces of himself that had been buried in literal and figurative sense. Backup arrived, 2 more rangers and a park law enforcement officer, all converging on the scene with practiced efficiency. They secured the area, established a perimeter, treated it like the crime scene their training said it was. Freeman sat on a bench near the boardwalk, handcuffed and muddy, watching rangers photograph the site, document the disturbance, catalog evidence. The law enforcement officer, a woman named Rodriguez who'd worked Yellowstone for 15 years, approached him with a practiced read of his rights. "Mr. Freeman, You're being charged with multiple violations of park regulations. Do you understand these charges?" Freeman nodded. "I understand. I'm also telling you that if you contact the Smithsonian Institution's National Archives, Military History Division, and mention the Yellowstone Survival Program declassification from January 2025, someone there will confirm what I'm telling you." Rodriguez paused. Specific references weren't typical of artifact hunters making excuses. She radioed the park's administrative office, requesting they contact the Smithsonian as Freeman suggested. Then they waited. Freeman patient and resigned on his bench. Rangers standing guard. Collins still angry about what he perceived as a blatant violation. The sun rose higher. Tourists began arriving for morning thermal viewing, and Freeman became an unexpected attraction, an old man in handcuffs, muddy and disheveled, clearly having been caught doing something. Some took photos. Some asked rangers what happened. Collins, eager to demonstrate proper enforcement, explained loudly about protecting park resources from people who think rules don't apply to them. Freeman said nothing, conserving energy for what he knew would be a long process. 2 hours later, Rodriguez's radio crackled with a call from park headquarters. A team from the Smithsonian was en route by helicopter, ETA 20 minutes. They'd confirmed Freeman's story, or at least confirmed that there was a story to verify. The Yellowstone Survival Program had indeed been declassified in January, a Cold War-era training initiative that had taught special operations soldiers to survive in extreme environments. The program's final exercise had been conducted in Yellowstone during winter 1975, with 12 soldiers participating. One had been seriously injured during the exercise. Raymond Freeman, evacuated with severe thermal burns after falling through crust near thermal pools. His equipment had been left behind, never officially recovered because acknowledging the program's existence would have required disclosing classified operations. Freeman had waited 50 years, watching declassification schedules until the month he could legally discuss it and attempt recovery. The Smithsonian team arrived like a small invasion force. Dr. Patricia Hammond, lead military historian, accompanied by 2 archival specialists and an Army liaison officer. They spread documents across a park picnic table while Freeman, still handcuffed, watched. Dr. Hammond approached him directly, her face apologetic. "Mr. Freeman, I'm so sorry for this situation. Your recovery request was filed properly. Your timing aligns with declassification, but there was apparently a communication breakdown with park services." She turned to Rodriguez. "This man is recovering his own personal effects from a now declassified military training site. The Smithsonian has been coordinating with him for 6 months. Everything he's excavated today belongs to him legally and personally." Rodriguez removed the handcuffs immediately. "I apologize, Mr. Freeman. We had no information about this." Freeman rubbed his wrists, accepting the apology with grace he'd learned from years of bureaucratic tangle. Dr. Hammond opened the evidence bags carefully, removing the objects rangers had catalogued. She cleaned them gently with distilled water and soft brushes, revealing details that made her pause. The dog tags showed Freeman's name, his service number from 1975, his blood type. The compass, despite 50 years of mineralization, showed custom modifications, adjustments Freeman had made for high-altitude navigation. The beacon was military surplus from the early 70s, decommissioned technology that was now historical in its own right. "Mr. Freeman, these are remarkable, not just for their historical value, but for what they represent. Tangible evidence of a program that existed only in classified files until this year." She looked at him with professional curiosity. "The burns you suffered that day? The medical report says you shouldn't have survived." Freeman nodded slowly, old pain flickering across his weathered face. "The thermal water was nearly boiling. I fell through into a pocket that had eroded under the crust. My training partner pulled me out, but not before I'd been scalded across 30% of my body. They stripped my gear off, got me to the evac helicopter. I spent 4 months in burn treatment, another year in physical therapy. The program ended while I was recovering. I never got to finish, never got my gear back, never got to properly close that chapter. He held the dog tags, his thumb tracing the barely legible letters. These have been here longer than most of those tourists have been alive, mineralizing, becoming part of the park. I needed them back. Not for their value, for what they represent, the day I almost died. The day I proved I could survive anything. Dr. Hammond made arrangements for proper site documentation. The location would be registered as a historical military training site, protected but acknowledged. She offered to have the items professionally restored, but Freeman declined. They're perfect as they are. Corroded, damaged, but recovered. That's the story. Collins, the ranger who'd arrested him, approached hesitantly. "Sir, I apologize. I was doing my job, but I should have listened more carefully. Should have called headquarters before making arrests." Freeman extended his hand. "You did exactly what you should have done. You saw someone digging in a protected area, and you protected it. That's good work. The system worked. It just took time to catch up with the facts." They shook, the young ranger learning a lesson about assumptions and patience that would serve him well in years to come. Freeman walked back to the thermal pool where he'd fallen 50 years ago, holding his recovered items, memories playing behind his eyes. The steam still rose in ethereal columns, the water still bubbled and churned, indifferent to human drama. He'd been 19 when he fell through, terrified and burning, convinced he would die there. He'd been 40 when he first tried to file paperwork for recovery, only to be told the program was still classified. He'd been 65 when he learned declassification was scheduled for 2025. And now, at 69, he finally held pieces of that day, tangible proof that he'd been there, that he'd survived, that the journey from broken soldier to recovered man was complete. He placed the items carefully in his pack, ready to return to the life he'd built in the 50 years since that training exercise. A life of survival in different sense, of moving forward while carrying the past. Subscribe to my channel if you believe some recoveries take a lifetime. Raymond Freeman waited 50 years to reclaim pieces of himself that had been left behind in a moment of crisis, buried under bureaucracy and classification and time. He was arrested for recovering his own identity, handcuffed for seeking closure that required patience beyond what most people could sustain. But he understood what young Ranger Collins was only beginning to learn, that doing things right often means doing them slowly, that systems designed to protect sometimes prevent healing, and that proving your truth requires more than words when words have been classified for half a century. Honor those who wait for justice when it would be easier to give up, who follow proper channels even when proper channels seem designed to frustrate, who understand that some pieces of yourself are worth recovering no matter how long it takes. Freeman's dog tag spent 50 years in thermal soil, becoming something other than what they started as, but still fundamentally his. Sometimes recovery isn't about restoration, it's about acknowledgement that what was lost deserves to be remembered.